Let's find out who we've got in the room. So, who's from LCF here? Raise your hand. Okay. Who's from CSM? Oh, I'm disappointed. Oh. Okay, who's from LCC? One. Oh, that's really bad. That's really bad. You need to rally the troops. Transformation. Formation. Okay, so who have we got from Ravensbourne? Oh, Ravensbourne. Yay, give yourselves a round of applause. Coming to you, AL. Okay, so who here are staff? Raise your hand. Who here are students? Okay, that's good, that's good. So today, the title of the event is Beyond Gender. I'm going to let our panellists, our wonderful panellists and chair talk about everything that they're going to do today. So I'm going to hand it over. Let's give them a round of applause first.
Hello everyone, I'm Katie. I'm the content developer for Shades of Noir. Really excited to be here today. And so if you want to say your name and your pronouns.
Sure.
Please.
Okay, so my name is Raju Rage, and my pronouns are they.
And my name is Montana Williamson, and my pronoun is she.
My name is S.A. Smythe, my pronouns are they, them.
My name is Travis Alabanza, my pronouns are them, they.
So we're going to go through some questions and then we will open up to the audience so you can keep your questions for then. Would you like to talk about your work? So you have some images to show, if you go through them.
So actually, I just prefer to show images,
Okay, sure.
so you get an idea. I mean, I'm a visual artist. I work interdisciplinary, so I work with performance, sculpture, and video, but I also work with textiles a lot in my practice. So.
Is this it?
Yeah, but it's frozen on the screen.
Is this it?
Sorry. So I'll just.
Yeah.
Technical.
Are you doing that?
Maybe we.
No, it was upstairs. Okay. Alright. So if you guys want to sit back down, we could go through the first question. Or if someone else wants to talk about their work until we sort this out.
Yeah, we can go through to our work.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, how are we doing? Good. I hate panels, I feel really awkward, so I trying to do all this joking and smiling. My name is Travis Alabanza. I'm a performance artist and writer, I guess. I don't know, I'm really rubbish with intros. But often my work is talking about my blackness and how that intersects with both my queerness, my femininity, my gender expression, but also deeply rooted with my class. So often my work is really referencing the fact that I was brought up on a council estate. So where does a trans femme body that is constantly transforming and changing fit into the early examples I had on a council estate? And a lot of my work is interested in why the art world doesn't look for people like me, why the art world rejects people like me, and how art can be made on the corner of my field by my corner shop. Yeah, so yeah.
Hello, my name is S.A. Smythe, also fit at intros. I'm an academic, writer, poet. Both in my academic and creative work, also that's a false distinction, but I'm really concerned with, and I study queer aesthetics. A lot of my poetry at the moment is concerned with things like self-discovery and community dispossession. I think I'll leave it at that.
My name is Montana Williamson. I'm currently visual manager for Kate Spade of Europe. I was also an alumni of Central St Martin's. I studied BA Textile Fashion Knitwear. My work was heavily concerned with the kind of interaction between knitwear in relation to sustainability and just challenging social hierarchies of society and how we take things for granted and obviously just kind of put them to the forefront of fashion and question it. That was what I kind of challenged.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so we don't have the pictures up, so I'll just say, I'm a visual artist, so my work is very visual. Unfortunately, we can't show it. But I'm interested in gender, mainly in gender, but also in migration and colonialism and how that's impacted the body, so history and memory and how that impacts the body and identity, contemporary diasporan identity.
Okay, so we can move to our first question, which is, what is femininity? So you could describe what it means to you or what you... I know it's really, really big.
Who wants to go first?
Yeah.
Okay, wow. So I think obviously this question is huge, and I'm gonna keep it brief, and it also relates to the fact that my example is what femininity is to me. I think that's completely relevant to where I was born, how I was raised, what privileges I've had, but also what oppressions have been forced upon me. So my femininity is gonna look so different to anybody next to me and anybody else in the room. I also think that it's often we talk about femininity and masculinity in this binary polar opposites from each other, and I want to slap that right on the head. I think for me it's this mix, but for me femininity is something that I wasn't allowed. Femininity was something that I was told I couldn't access for many reasons. Being born in a body that people were calling male, I think femininity was seen as weak, and any times I showed femininity, I was either to be bullied, harassed, or assaulted, and since then, femininity has actually been the exact opposite. So for me, I think femininity is power. Femininity is dangerous power, right? In the sense that I had a different outfit I wanted to wear today, but I didn't have time to plan my safety outfit for the tube. So in that sense, femininity can be so much power for me, in the sense that when I came here and did my makeup, I felt powerful, I felt great, I felt like I could speak in front of everyone. But also femininity is this power that I think the outside world are afraid of. And for me, femininity is something that everyone can access, but only few are allowed to safely access.
That's great, thank you. Who wants to go first?
I think femininity for myself is going to be completely different to someone else besides me. As a young Black British individual, for me it's more to do with obviously how my experiences as a woman, how I go about my daily life will be slightly different to someone of obviously of a different colour or culture. I think it's, for me it embodies obviously my certain attributes and the way in which I, present myself, but I think it goes beyond that again, as Travis was mentioning. It's more to do with certain attributes, but obviously just the way you conduct yourself in a way that shouldn't be confined or bind to obviously male or female. I think it's much bigger and much broader than that. And I think we, moving forward with fashion, it should be more about obviously the embodiments of obviously what that kind of symbolises as a woman. Doesn't have to generally mean gender-wise. It could just mean certain attributes that are associated with that.
Thank you.
Oh, you want me to?
Sure, I can say. I don't want to go last, actually. Sorry, I'm going to jump in.
Okay, go on.
No pressure. I also, I think it's really important to know that the responses that we're giving are always situated in our personal experience and identities. And so what I was thinking about when Montana and Travis were speaking was, of course, my response as well as listening to them. And I wanted to say, so I just want to reflect my hesitation, because I wanted to answer the question and say, for me, femininity is nurturing, but then I immediately sort of recoiled in my head and thinking about it, because femininity, like femaleness, are often really bound together, and then also fall into stereotypical assumptions, like femininity, female-bodied, female-identified people are supposed to be the nurturers and the carers. But in terms of my own personal experience, being raised by people who put their femininity at the front and had it was really powerful. It was also really nurturing, and it showed me how to be to sort of collects that kind of power, and it so basically it raised me. And I am not read as no, I do identify as like a feminine type person, but I agree with Travis that it's a really difficult thing when that when I have to put it in that kind of sentence or that introduction, because to me there is a lot of femininity in the way that I interpret my own sense of fashion, my own identity, my own ability to relate to other people. So femininity is something that I agree, yeah, is really powerful, but also is often like misunderstood and reduced, like a lot of aspects of gender and identity.
Thank you.
Yeah, so most of my work is around femininity and also my identity. I identify as femme, so I have a lot to say on the subject. Now, we managed to get some of the pictures of my work up so you can have a look and how I explore my gender through my work. But actually, in terms of like the question of what is femininity, I wrote something down because about 10 years ago someone asked me this question for a magazine. So I just wrote something back then that I'm just going to read out because I think it's still relevant and how I feel about it now. So they asked me, what is feminine to you?
Do you want to go
Yeah, if you can just go through the images, that would be great. Okay, so people always want to know what defines gender, and I struggle between giving an answer and refusing to answer, because a refusal often means they have to consider gender more fluidly and broadly, rather than a fixed state that can be explained. Also, they have to then figure it out for themselves, which means questioning themselves and others further than they have before, which will lead them hopefully to find out more than they bargained for. That, I think, would be beneficial for people who just need simple answers to complex questions for some, or who do not even question beyond what they've been told or expect answers. I have felt comfortable with both masculinity and femininity, and uncomfortable with both at different times. I also allow both expressions and in different combinations, depending on how many different factors, like environment, mood, or safety. I don't often restrict myself to how I behave or the activities that I do because of whether they're considered masculine or feminine. I feel very much like both are meshed in me and not at all polarized as such, and I often cannot differentiate between them. I've always been told that I'm not feminine enough and then not masculine enough, sometimes that I'm not trans enough or then not genderqueer enough. So the fact that I'm not complying makes me willingly and unwillingly confused about gender and fitting into masculinity and femininity in a proper sense. I will never meet other people's ideals. So that realization is that gender is not so fixed at all. It will depend on the beholder's eyes, beliefs, opinions, and experiences as to what they consider gender to comprise of. What is masculine or feminine in my personal experience or my culture will not be in someone else's, and that is also an important consideration as it becomes a more multifaceted discussion to incorporate many factors that many people may not be aware of at first. And of course, the most dominant cultures in a given space will get to dominate what is more acceptable with gender in definition. For this reason, I make a political statement to not define what is masculine or feminine, as I feel that we're constantly being told, and really this can only be answered personally by each and every individual person in self-definition. For me, being feminine is looking to the heritage of strong Indian female role models who expressed themselves as they wanted and who were not afraid to show it to anyone. For me, masculinity means being different to all those negative male role models I had in my life, making a stand to be a different male-identified person to them, rejecting certain aspects like misogyny and introducing others like feminism and building on things I relate strongly to, like sisterhood and brotherhood.
Thank you so much. Is that the last picture?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Okay, so that was really powerful. So our next question is, how can fashion help break down social constructs of identity?
Well, I think it can be used as like a marketing, obviously the marketing tool. It's kind of at the forefront. It's the media, it's the magazines that we read, it's obviously the places that we see on billboards and things like that. I think it's really powerful, and not everyone's aware of how powerful it actually is. I think sometimes the actual connotations and examples that are used are not a true reflection of society today. there are so many groups that are not represented within the media, which need to be overturned and kind of symbolised heavily and more dominantly within the media. I think fashion itself is a culture which so many young people look to gain some kind of fellowship, some kind of groupage, or being seen as something that's you're part of, and so therefore we need to include all people within that, and it's such a powerful thing that we can use.
Thank you.
I mean, I want to pick up on that because, like I said, I work on queer aesthetics, specifically Mediterranean Caribbean migrations and queer aesthetics, and to recognise what Montana was saying, specifically on the linking marketability and sort of consumer power, but to say that I think that people, this could just be really naive, I think people do recognise how powerful things like fashion and aesthetics are, precisely, and I said I wouldn't talk about Beyonce today, but here we are. At the Super Bowl in the US, at the sports event, I guess, wore fashion that was linked to the Black Panther movement in the US, like the black beret and the all black sort of leather-clad outfit, and the different outrages, whatever that was caused by that, like sheer showing of black femininity, American femininity, but also it was precisely something that stirred up a lot of feeling and outrage and history, precisely because the fashion linked to those things. And that's not at all, maybe the opposite of an endorsement of that, because I think there's that savvy in the marketability of certain fashion that kind of can void or vacate the actual movements that have taken those up. But to also say that sometimes I see the mainstream fashion industry, and I think it definitely recognizes the power of marginalized people, because it specifically co-opts those senses of fashion and that desire for fellowship and community, and then makes it something that someone can wear. It makes it so that white people think it's now hip to wear a bindi, when people who are wearing them have been whose culture it belongs have been ostracized, marked as other, marked as foreign for that same amount of time. Do you know what I mean? So just wanted that to be reflected.
Yeah, I just want to follow on from what you said, because for me, when I heard that question, I'm wondering if you mean the industry or just how people use fashion, because the industry for me is mostly about commodification. It's about turning something to a product, right, and making money from that. So for me, I think actually fashion can really learn from what's happening outside. Fashion industry can learn really from what's happening outside of that, what people are doing on the streets, for example. Maybe not, I don't know, I feel a bit strange about the whole commodification of fashion. I wanted to say more, but I've forgotten now. I'll come back.
Yeah, so I'll then go on from there and then move on to the less industry-based answer. I think what we've been seeing at the moment, and that might even be why this event exists, is this new hip quirky thing that oh my god, look at androgyny, let's look at beyond the binary stuff, let's look at all these trans folk, and it's been commodified into these white androgynous, not even trans identifying models on these big borders, on these big billboards, showing a transness that isn't mine and a transness that isn't the folks I know. And I think that's the danger of the industry, is that they find something that's pop and find something that's on the cutting edge at the moment, and we see it plastered everywhere. But we see it plastered in a way that doesn't reflect my body, doesn't reflect my other queer black bodies with me. And then you see something, but then it's that flip, because the Jaden Smith advert comes out, and I was cautious about mentioning Jaden today because I don't really have all my feels out on it yet, except I had a response from a student that I was working with in a youth group in America that saw the advertisement. And this is the whole thing, we talk about commodification, but then this advert comes out, and we don't know how Jaden identifies, but I'm pretty sure at the moment, Jaden still identifies as cis, and is cis, and I get this message from a 14-year-old young black kid that I was teaching in the summer saying, "Oh my god, Travis, did you see Jaden's advert? That's us. Capital letters, sends email," right? And this kid is never that excited, he wasn't in my class. And I think that's a real thing, right? So fashion does have this power when they show something that's authentic and maybe doesn't feel like that. But also then the flip side is that none of these billboards, none of these advertisements affect how I can walk down the street.
Exactly.
So like, and actually like when I don't want to talk about industry, I want to talk about like how fashion has like powered me and like empowered me to break those binaries. Like sometimes those stairs on the tube, those stairs in like the streets are that like, they're horrible and they're awful, but sometimes when I'm with my clique or if I'm just feeling powerful myself, I stand there, I'm like, I'm breaking all your binary views just by existing right now in this cheap Missy Empire dress. So like, fuck that, like that's breaking the binary, right?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly what I was going to say around the power in terms of it does become more acceptable, or some things can become more acceptable in that power of fashion to say, okay, there are more genderqueer bodies or more binary bodies, but then it's like, who is that reaching? Who is acceptable for? Because like you said, you know, it's not going to make your life any safer walking down the street. So it can be acceptable on the screen or on the advert, but then in real life, people still have that you know, there's still that connection to violence that you're still going to experience. So it's like, where does that shift? You know, where does it shift? Like you have to also be on that billboard to then not face that violence. Yeah, that's what I'm interested in. Yeah.
Thank you. So to follow from that, our next question is, how can fashion be used to empower? So you could talk about your own experience that you've touched on.
Yeah, you touched on that.
Yeah, I guess I'll continue. I think fashion can be so empowering. I was thinking about this when I read over the questions last night. Like I didn't want to just focus on how fashion has been suffocating for me in the sense of like from a young age, how suffocating what I could wear could be, and how it's still this really like complex and nuanced relationship, because whenever I'm thinking of an outfit, hand in hand goes in safety, and I'm really cautious to keep on bringing that up, but then I'm also like, these are the exact conversations that need to be reinstated and retold every single time that like, you know, daily violence is a thing for trans femme bodies that like aren't having like safety in that sense. But I think empowering is those moments when you're like, for me, okay, I'll give an example instead of just waffling. For me, it's like getting in a group of your trans friends, right? Getting in a group of your trans femme friends, and you're all kind of outside the binary, and you spend like an hour and you put on some like blasting tunes in your room, and you're doing your makeup with each other, and you're trying on outfits, and you take boss-ass selfies, and then when you feel great enough, if you want to, you feel, even if, okay, we'll do option A, you don't want to go outside, you're like, let's hold on to this moment, let's not like have the outside do anything to us. Let's go in our living room, if we got one, let's go in the hallway, walk around, take pictures, take selfies, post it on Instagram, have all your queer and trans friends tell you like, yes, you look baddest, like, you look like the second coming, like, this is great. And then if you decide, then go outside. Like, that's how fashion is empowering, right? Because you're going out and you're saying like, fuck this. For so long I've been told that I can only go in top man and look at their boring ass clothes, and now I'm here redefining what fashion is for me. It's so empowering. Fashion isn't my gender, and like I hate reducing. I think when I'm doing performance art, it's really dangerous that people like reduce my gender to my performance and see my fashion as like a performance and my gender therefore as a performance. No, like my gender is the same when I'm in, my gender is not the same, but my gender in the sense that I still identify as non-binary when I'm in a t-shirt and jeans, in my PJs or in a dress. But it's what fashion has been able to do to like extend how I can feel, and like that's where I think the power comes from, extending that feeling.
Thank you. Real.
Yeah, I mean, I think defining your own gender according to your own terms and having your own agency to do that is empowering, and fashion can be a vehicle for that. But I wouldn't say that fashion, for me, would be in itself an empowerment. I think it goes along with how you decide to use it.
Yeah, I think it's more to do with yourself, your identity and who you are is obviously the primary focal point. Fashion again does act obviously as a voice that can empower you and can embody what you want to symbolise to the outside world. But as Travis said earlier, it's more about how you feel inside and obviously what you want to echo to the outside. Fashion acts as a forefront, it acts as like a voice in a visionary way. It doesn't always have to, obviously, you don't have to say anything. It's just the way in which you wear the clothing, the kind of swag you have, as you said, and things like that. So for me, whenever I put on clothing, it kind of creates a mood. It kind of creates a voice that I don't necessarily want to speak, but people can kind of get their own interpretation from what I'm wearing. And for me, it empowers me. It makes me feel amazing. It can create so many different emotions, and that's something that I love within fashion. But then there's the flip side, as you were saying, that people can embody you by what you're wearing and forget that actually you are you are an actual individual behind the clothing, and there is more to you than just the clothing. So for me, that's what it is.
Yeah, I'm really feeling that second to Travis and Tana. Like, I guess you've all touched on it actually. Especially, like I said, in terms of my presentation, that those things are often reduced to one and the same, but also misreduced and misread, and it's partially a testament to the kind of binary spaces that we still are being colonized by, whether we want to be or not. Because I also feel the beginning of like Travis's option A, for example, like getting dressed either with people or to go to people that are like like-minded and like dressed or whatever. Like if we share similar aesthetics, but then like leaving the house and then often being like misread, often in those same spaces. So I'm not even talking about like normative, like or like the like white hetero cis patriarchal spaces, like that is the world, that is specifically England. But like in terms of like how fashion reads into desire, not just for yourself but for other people, I've been sometimes, specifically lately, feeling a little bit like robbed in a sense and disappointed in some of the spaces in my communities, like Cutie Park or Black, ostensibly radical communities where like bow tie still equals X, and then I try to say, well no, I just like I like it, and that's even on like thinking about gender. But I think parts of the erasure, or parts of maybe my lament from what Montana was saying, of like the fact that fashion can be not something that requires a voice, is I feel like I want to walk around, you know, like if you go to an art exhibit or a museum and it has a little like placard there that's like, this is from this, and like it means this, and it's from the 3rd century of whatever place that we stole from, and I sort of want it to be, I feel like I need that, and it's kind of a bummer. So I don't know if that's a testament to like me not like working my own relationship to fashion more efficiently, but like I don't know how to like walk around with a placard that said like my grandfather was of the Windrush generation and was literally on a boat and like dressed in this certain way, and was one of the people that also showed me actually a lot about femininity and softness and like self-embracing and potential and possibilities, and I read a lot about like Black liberation and Black dandies and like what that meant in its time, like in its own moment in the 18th and 19th century, about Black liberation and Black literacy and Black abolition movements, and all of that sort of manifested in my desire to put on this bow tie, as well as I think I look cute and I think it's fly. Like there's that fun and there's that self-desire and desire for self-expression as well, but I really wish that those two things were not like pulled apart. And that's not to be too academic about it, right? Like it's never just about desire or fun or expression. It's also that you're trying to say something, even if it's just to yourself or your people.
I just wanted to add to that, because I'm really interested in my work with textiles. I'm using textiles to tell a narrative and a story of a history or history that's been either told or erased. So I really feel that in terms of how clothes carry memory and carry history and carry narratives with them. And I think that's what happens, or what tends to happen with fashion, is that it gets reduced to an aesthetic, just a purely aesthetic symbol, which can be fun and you can play with, but I'm really interested in how those textiles and those clothes can actually carry narratives, and trying to think about how that can happen visually. In the image that was shown of me with the sari that I printed, I've got images that were taken from archives to do with colonial migration, and I tried to incorporate that so that it's still aesthetic, but it can carry that narrative in some way. And I think a lot of misreading happens because that lack of being able to carry stories and carry narratives.
Thank you. So our next question is, how can fashion industries support the ever-growing diverse communities? So we've already touched on that as well a bit, but
You have to want to, I guess.
Pay us. No, but real talk, right? I don't know, I have some friends, a couple of my friends recently have gone to CSM, and I'm really, really proud of them. They're Black, they're from my council estate. It was a huge journey for them to get here, and they're coming here as like a mature-ish student. I don't think 22 is mature, but like, you know, we're still kids. But like, and then they come here and they're super excited, and then they get this shock when like the industry doesn't want them, and when the industry won't listen to them, or when the industry will tell them, actually, like, you can't design like this because this was in last week, or this was in last year, but they commodified that trend. Like, sorry, gold hoops was when we were interested in you last year. And it's like, I think the industry, in order to start doing stuff for us and bodies like ours, just has to put us at the, not even on the table, but at the head of the table. Like, because if we're not running it, then all that's going to happen is bad representation of it. Like, where are our black trans people on the table deciding what to wear, decide what looks good for us, rather than just being booked for like one photo shoot or like one little ID magazine thing, you know? Like, yeah, so put us at the head of the table and then see how that table turns fly as fuck.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. I think as a current graduate of CSM, going through the whole system, it's an amazing experience within itself. But I think for me, I felt as if I didn't identify with a certain group, and the way in which I designed as an artist and a designer wasn't conformed in what they wanted. And so, you know, you're marginalised into a section, which is so hard to deal with once you get into industry. And I think unless you're, you know, strong enough to actually break the boundaries and actually disregard what the industry say, it can be actually off-putting, daunting. And so, as Travis was saying, I think they need, as he said, which is so important, the actual strong people within it, and is the actual people, us. I don't think they have enough of us within the industry. I've been working within the industry now for about 6 years, but it's taken such a long time to get into it. And actually the people that are at the head of the table are not our representation. And I think so that would be the preliminary beginning of things, is obviously getting the people that have gone through it, understood it, and who can give you the actual, you know, primary source of what they're going through.
I think it just, the fashion industry represents a larger structural problem of oppression, and until that's resolved, really, then it's not going to be reflected in that industry. I mean, I'm thinking about who makes the cloth, who makes the textiles that then get used in the industry. You know, there's real disparage. What's the word? Like,
disparity?
Yeah, disparages of like, yeah, who gets to have that's what's the word? Sorry.
Access?
Yes.
Sorry. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there's just, it's polarized, and that really needs to change. So I don't see that happening until that really happens. But I think the more, I mean, the thing about fashion is that it really does look to the streets. It really, and you know, who is on the streets? It is people like us, you know. So it's like they want that on one hand, they want to commodify another. But yeah, structurally, I think there needs to be changes.
Yeah, just quickly, because I'm not in the fashion industry, and I don't really care what those people that we're talking about think, except precisely for the reason that Raju mentioned, like they are specifically looking towards us. So I think one way, and I also agree that other systems and structures of repression would have to shift and change radically for this to even be possible. But one step that really shouldn't be that grand, but of course we know it is that the people who are already in charge, like unless there was some sort of like mass wokeness, like a mass consciousness, and all these like white fashion moguls would just like lay down their cloth that they again didn't make or craft or produce, and just like walk, everyone collectively like walk backwards out of the room. They could just be aware of the sentence that I like to tell white people who think that allies are a thing all the time, which is that it's not about you. Like that like sometimes I feel like the idea about being fashion forward in the larger industry is like not just looking to the streets, but like seeing the most like minoritized or like unique or like from the small place that speaks least to your experience, and then like uplifting that. And I think even if a similar thing wound up happening, to make that a less violent process would be specifically to go, well, like this is also not for me. And so to do something as like what Raji was talking about, or like forgive me if I'm like misrepresenting it, but like at least being more conscious or aware that the cloth I mean, let alone like the production of those materials into the fashion industry, but like the thing that is the quote unquote final result contains a narrative in it. So if you just learn about what that narrative is or could be, then the fact that you or like a white fashion mogul designer was still like getting saris and putting them on a runway, maybe not putting them on white models, maybe not putting them on cis models, you know, like thinking about, well, the narrative comes from these kind of people. Oh wait, these people exist. So why don't I just get them to like put on their own clothes and like walk a bit, you know, like I think that granted they'd still be in power, but it would cede some of the way for their overarching narratives and not have such a heavy hand on the process or the experience.
Yes. I mean, then it also links to colonialism because it's, do you know what I mean? That's what colonialism is about. It's taking things and making them yours.
Yeah.
And I think there's still that mentality of that's how it works, and that needs to change.
Yeah.
I was just going to add quickly, like, because I'm all about like imagining other worlds and this, like what you mentioned about like our systems of oppression would have to go first. Like, what would it look like if, like, instead of us looking to New York Fashion Week at the moment for our clothes, instead, like, Black and other POC folk cultivated in our communities to decide that their green next to their shop was going to be their runway? Or what would it look like to say that our basketball court was going to be where we were going to show our athletic trends? Like, all these ideas of how we can actually just say, we don't need you. Like, we don't need New York Fashion Week. We don't need all these, like, ideas. Let's find, like, our next door neighbor, our auntie, the people cooking dinner for us on Sunday and decide, hey, after dinner and after church, let's go, because church was fashion for me, right? Like that was my early example of like powerful Black femininity. Like those outfits were dope, and then my outfit turned dope because of that. Like, so let's like, that's our runway. Like, we don't need New York Fashion Week.
That's so real. Those hats really changed.
This is my mom.
It's like a South Asian wedding.
So our next question is, will androgynous fashion replace men's and women's wear?
I mean, I feel like the need to just relate it back again to my work, because my work is a lot about looking at, okay, in the East, like the way that cloth is used is very much more fluidly. It's not tailored, it's not cut, it's like pure cloth, because they know there is that narrative of how long it takes to make cloth. That it's a very precious piece of material, that they don't cut it and tailor it. Traditionally, this is. And then in the West, where it's very much about being tailored and fixed, and gender, and how gender was also the Western concepts and ideals of gender was taken, to outside of the West in the global South, and put onto those cultures. So I think that for me, that connection is there in terms of like androgyny and fluidity of gender compared to like the West, where it's very much about fixed gender, fixed clothing. So I don't know, maybe reclaiming tradition or seeing another perspective of how we wear clothes and then how our gender fits in with that.
Thank you.
And specifically speaking to that, or I guess not the potential that was just laid out, but the way things are in the West, my answer would be always quickly like no, in the sense that I hope not, precisely for two branches, two reasons. One is that so often in the West, when I hear the word androgyne or androgynous used, it really just means masculine, and I actually I think feminine clothing or female I don't know if they're like femme type like sartorial choices are lit and actually should remain and be centered. So if there was an androgyny that centered that, then I'd be for it. And then also it not just means like there's a lot of things that go with that androgynous being reduced to the masculine. Also, like was pointed out, like Roger pointed out, it would mean like not just well tailored or well fit, but like slim or narrow or like fitting a specific kind of body. So like if we had androgynous that wasn't just like femme centered and femme uplifting, but also had fat femmes being like, oh, that's androgynous, and I absolutely see how that's androgynous, and not like angular or pointed or masculine, then I'd be for it. But since that's literally not the case, and what we have are women, cis white women, Kate something or other specifically, I'm thinking about, who can like put on a pompadour and like put on a suit and like open the blouse just a little bit, and then everyone like all my butch friends are like losing their minds, and all like this is people losing their minds because how radical and how amazing is this? I say no. I say it has to be like, if the future is androgynous, it has to be fat, it has to be femme, it has to be Black or brown. So
Okay.
Thank you.
yeah, as you touched upon, I think it needs to be a true representation. If that's the way that the fashion is going. The westernised culture, as you said, is confined to gender in particular, and I think that shouldn't be the way it is. As you said, it should have true representations of all cultures and diverse ethnic minorities, because we are included within that number of people, and so that's an important point. I think the westernised culture needs to accept and break down barriers of obviously having, you know, certain representations in place and have everyone represented for it to be, you know, a true representation.
I got nothing to add. I think essay killed it for me. Yeah, just short answer, like that androgyny won't fit me, so nah.
Wasn't there an androgynous label that was in Selfridges or something?
Yeah, it was shit.
Yeah, what was it? What did it look like?
I'm not into
yeah. Anyway, they're trying it, so it probably failed, but yeah, they're trying.
I also want to just like toss out like something that should be, what was it called?
Agenda, I think it was called.
Oh, that's right.
Does anyone here know about it? Like
off the record,
pop-up
actually.
stores they have around Selfridges
Yeah.
with some determined brands they put on the say it's just genderless kind of clothing.
Yeah.
I also wanted to add just really quickly that I don't think, like, I understand like mobilizing, you know, like terms like people of color or like black and minority ethnics, and in the fashion industry, I really don't think. I think that's a misrepresentation and a shifting of power away from the people who actually have like all the power. So we're like raw material and source material from the people who produce the cloth to the people who are being observed on the streets, who are like creating the culture and these fashion forward trends. It actually is the minority of people who like whose bodies like look like that, and like who are hyper tall, have angular features, who can like be clothes hangers for like runways and like put anything on and then have it fit them. Androgynous or not, and I think if we recognize that we're not the minority ethnics, but actually like the actual creators of capital T and C, the culture, but also various cultures, I think that's a like a radical thing that we can mobilize around.
Thank you. So our last question relates to our next event, which is on 16th of March, and it's called Feminisms, the Art of Woman. And I'd like to ask you, what does feminism mean to you?
It means my mother, it means my aunties, it means my grandmother, it means my great-grandmother, it means all the strong black women that paved the way before me. I try and focus on that because I think so often I can get hyped into centering whiteness in when talking about feminism, like, oh, feminism means these white feminists that exclude me and my voice, when actually like I want to lift up the black women that came before me that have not just like included my voice but like given me the power to have my voice and made my voice feel valid. So it means black women before me that have like paved the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really real. I was going to say, I can say a similar thing in that for me, a lot of what I'm doing now, and also my academic career, my writing, poetry and otherwise, centers around language. And fashion, I think, is just another one of those languages. And I think feminism, or the way I came about it, was like living in Jamaica and then having like just random children, but like children in the town, come to my aunt's house to like learn how to sew, and then we just had like curtains that were too washed and too worn, and so we used them to make parts of our uniforms. And it's like learning how to craft, or like being in that space and that kinship with other femme and female identified people, and like sharing things like recipes and other kind of language, learning how to cook in those spaces, learning how to craft, learning how to like be a person who listens and is engaged in community, to me is what feminism is, or feminisms are.
I think feminism for me is really to do with my black British culture. It's to do with my upbringing, my what you touched upon. For me, my creativity, my whole idea of being a knitwear designer, the idea of crocheting was a symbolism of who I was and what my family embodied. It was a craft that was brought through all of the women, and for me it embodies strength. and it embodies me as a black British woman today in society. And I use it within my fashion industry to kind of speak messages that I can't necessarily say, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's just an empowerment, and I'm proud to be black British and part of that feminism.
Cool. Yeah, I really like what's been said so far in terms of connecting feminism to personal kind of experiences rather than just a political standpoint. Similarly, I was raised by, for me it's about the women who raised me. I was raised by my mother and my aunts. I was raised in a women's refuge. I pretty much have been raised by women, and I didn't really have many male role models, for example, so that's where I learned about femininity and my identity, and also my masculinity as well. And for me, I guess feminism is my life, and sometimes it's not, it's a conflicted place, because often our narratives are left out of a kind of a dominant feminism. For example, trans feminisms are usually left out. But it is, for me, it's my life, it's my work, the work that I make, in terms of telling the stories of my grandmother, who was a seamstress, my mother was a seamstress, and that passing down of knowledge, but also that disconnect from history and legacy that we don't often know about in the diaspora and through migration. So yeah, feminism for me is a lot of different things, but that connect from me to the people in my life.
Thank you. So we can now open up to the audience, so if you have questions, it's time to ask them now.
Or comments?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, firstly, it's been great listening to you all, because I think all of your messages and everything that you're saying, for me, how I'm receiving it, there's a big section of society, which is the majority of society, is the masses, and that's where the fashion industry, that's the marketing, PR, everything is aimed at the masses. And if you're on the sidelines, you stay on the sidelines if you allow yourself to stay there, if you don't have a voice. And I see all of you panelists as having a voice. And so that voice becomes relevant when the masses get used to whatever it is that they've been fed. That becomes boring, and then it kind of opens up the way, because in my experience, my parents came to London in the 50s, and they were black, Nigerian, dark-skinned, and they were not accepted, so their stories are exactly like yours. It was awful. Travis, your experience about experiencing violence, that's what my mum and dad went through because of their skin colour. Very visible, they couldn't blend into the background. So now it's 2016, and I can walk wherever I want as a dark-skinned black woman, and it's okay. I might get looks, it might be, go up north and it might be difficult, but essentially you guys are telling a story which I like to believe that in another 10 years or so, that the masses will be absolutely accepting of everything that you're saying, and you can walk freely, and you can feel you can be who you are without having to say, what did you call it, Travis?
Call it my safety outfit.
Yeah, without having to don a safety
cute
outfit, which is like insane. I've never even heard of that before. It's completely insane. But more power to you, and I'm inspired by that. So that was my comment. It's just been, I can see all of your stories in other timelines, in other experiences here in the UK at least. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes.
I just wanted to add to what the lady was saying. I'm not a student, I'm Alexia's mum. And
So embarrassed.
And I've always, for me personally, I just love what I've heard today. It's just amazing. Because as a young girl, when I was growing up, I was born in the UK but grew up in Ghana. I came over when I was 12. And I've always been like the black sheep of the family. I never kind of conformed to what my mum and dad wanted me to be. So it was always, why can't you be normal? And I always used to say, what does normal mean? What is the definition of normal? And I've always said to myself that when I have my kids, I'm always going to let them be who they are and be free and express how they are and who they want to be in society.
Alexa's mom's trying to make me cry right now.
Not today. I mean, to add to that, I'm actually totally dyslexic, so I can't read and write either. So it was like, what's wrong with this girl? My parents always kind of found that should we just kind of dump her somewhere because she doesn't fit into how a family should be. So my daughter decided she wants to go into fashion. And I said to her, do you know what, I am 100% behind you. Go for it and you're going to do really well. And my mum's, every time we go to visit my mum, which is her grandma, she would say, oh, I've got a grandson who just plays music, because my son's a musician. And I've got a daughter who just sews clothes. None of them are doctors, lawyers, or solicitors.
Yay.
So, and if anyone's got African sort of background, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're not one of the three, you don't belong. So I actually went into London College of Fashion and I studied fashion, hair and makeup and how to make wigs. And I completely broke that barrier in my family. And I'm still sort of the outcast. Everywhere I go, it's like, oh, she's a bit different. So that's me. And I love each one of you for what the stories you've told today, for being different, for being who you are, and continue to aspire to be who you want to be. And hopefully, like the lady said, in future, I want to see your clothes on the catwalk. You want to, I don't know, I'm sorry. I want to see your, I think you're amazing. You've really inspired me today. But in the middle, sorry, I'm not really good with names. With the bow tie and your style. Amazing. Continue to be, never change and never conform to what society want you to be.
Alexa's mom is really, all black people, everything.
I'm
Look,
team
come
you.
on.
I invited me today. I almost not came, but I said, I'm going to drop everything I'm doing. I'm going to come along with you because I know that she's going to do well. And the stories you've told today have really inspired her. Because every time she does her projects, it's completely off what the lecturers are looking for. And I say to her, let's keep going because you're going to make it. And you're going to help her, obviously, to get to where she wants to be.
You're going to be really grateful in 20 years for this conversation. So just thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you for sharing.
So the most interesting thing is like there's this like narrative in the media that the black community is so against trans and is so against like other sexualities, and I think what's just happened just proves that wrong. And I think like there's so many different stories that we hear about, and I actually wanted to go back to the agenda. Like, what do you think about companies? Because to me, it's like you're just jumping on the struggle. Like, you don't care, but where is there a percentage of the profits going into something, or how? Although we need it, and not everything can be like given back to charity, because we live in a capitalist world and everyone wants to make money. But how can what for you would show that? Oh, actually, say for example, LV just done this campaign and they've highlighted Jason, but how then can you believe that they're being genuine? What would they need to do to show you their genuineness?
So, someone mind if I go first? So I think like one, you hit the nail on the head. Like, it's hard under capitalism for it ever in that kind of structures to be truly genuine. What would tell me that I would maybe get behind it more and maybe like not hold it up to as much, like I'm not going there, is like who's designing their clothes, who's leading the marketing campaigns, who's at, again, that head of the table. So if I saw that like transgender queer models that aren't just white, slim and able-bodied were there, and if I saw that they were being designed by like the amazing trans designers that we know exist and are out there, and the right to the core, it was like held with trans POC, like down to the styling of the shoot, down to the photographer, down to like the people writing it, because all these people exist, right? Like in all the creative industries, they're there. Then I'd be like, oh, this is hella dope. Maybe I can, like, I will jump on it. Like, fuck it, I would jump on that bandwagon, right? Because that would show me that they're not commodifying on it. Instead, they're saying, look, yo, this is something we don't know about. Let's give it to the experts, right? Because they're the experts, we're the experts. So, like, yeah, like, I'd love to see, because I'm, like, you know, there's so many, we always get these little art, especially at the moment. I feel like because it's February, I feel like because Vice has this thing on queer and transness at the moment, that, like, we're seeing so many up-and-coming, amazing, like, trans, all of these little all of these different categories and subsections of art world. What would it look like if we got given the funds? We weren't like being told to do it for free for like some exposure. Instead, we were given like money in every aspect. Then I'd be like, yeah, let me go buy these clothes.
Yeah, real. And also a way that's like what Travis said is already under the iceberg. But I think if we like got all the way to the root of the matter, and just to recognize like I think about it. It's not like a new idea, but like what Raju has been saying like throughout, and specifically it sounds like in their work, working with these materials has also made it really clear for me that given the reins, given the funds, but another way to not exist on this like zero-sum capitalist tip, this like capitalist game would be the people that are producing the cloths and like doing the like dyeing the wool and doing all this stuff were paid a living and sustainable wage. So granted, there's still that like the capitalist enterprises that can still do that, but I actually don't think it's true. I think it's also in line with like the narratives that you're saying that we're being fed in the media, like the people who are like up and coming fashion moguls, like the Kanye West, or like that's the worst example because he's the worst, but like who always is talking about like getting money, getting paper, looking like everybody wants these Yeezys, and then I had to Google what those were, and then but then also being in all this debt. Like if pursuing your art shouldn't have to go hand in hand with capitalism. Obviously, we're like not be naive. We're under a capitalist system, but it could be that you want to like have self-expression or whatever your motivations are for producing this thing, this like cultural artifact, this object, this thing for practical use. Also have it sustain your family, but also sustain the families of the people that got you there as well. So it could be that, like in this like idealist sort of space, and I think is actually really sustainable and really possible. It could be that everyone gets enough to like not just like have a livable wage, but like thrive and pursue their own passions and their own arts and their own creative whatever they want to pursue. And then even if the balance at the end of the day was zero, we would have like a thriving and sustainable community that was built by us and also was for us.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I wouldn't feel comfortable wearing a range of clothes that were marketed towards me as an androgynous, genderqueer, trans, whatever person, off the backs of someone who's being exploited and being oppressed in order to make those clothes. Like even if they were really nice clothes, I wouldn't. I hardly ever buy clothes now anyway. Because I'm just really conscious about where it comes from and how it's made and how it's produced, and I just buy secondhand clothes, to be honest. But I just feel like struggles have to be connected. We can't
That's
just
what I'm
have
saying,
gender. Yeah, exactly. So for me, I would have to see all of that.
That's a good way to say it.
Yes, the back.
Hi, I'm Beth, and I work in the diversity team at
Not really.
You just speak up a little bit.
I'm Beth, and I work in the diversity team at the university.
Okay.
One of our jobs is to support trans students. So students who are coming into the university and identify as trans in any way, our job is to try and work with them and make sure that the university is a more inclusive place. And a couple of years ago, one of our students said that the first time she came to UAL, she was just looking for a sign that said the trans students are welcome. And I'm just wondering from the panel, what would be the one thing a couple of things maybe that you would say to universities to do to make sure that they're more inclusive spaces for trans students?
So I've just left my students' union. I was just saying to Essay, like, this is just funny timing. I've just left my student. I've been like with my students' union actively campaigning and working for like 2 years over a spat with my diversity team. So this is funny, and the main reason is like my point is just like hire us. Like the thing that was getting so upsetting for me is that my diversity team were all white. My diversity team, there was no trans people. My diversity team that was talking about all this, like I don't want diversity, I want liberation, or just to walk through like the hallways about that shit. So like, my like really like I have like nice responses that may help that are fluffy that I can give you as well and email you, and that's what I've been doing with them for 2 years. But really like the mood, it's just funny that you said that stuff to myself with the diversity team. My real thing is just like hire a trans person. Like they're the people that will be able to like make trans people feel welcome. Like find them, and if that means giving up some people's jobs, or hey, creating new jobs, because unis have money, right? Like these institutions like CSM is rich as fuck. Like get some trans people working because there's trans people looking for jobs that would do the job so much better.
I mean, I don't believe in.
But good on you for asking that though. Like that didn't need to come off like I just.
I don't believe in policy or an inclusion process, to be honest. I think scrap inclusion. I think policy is about making things look a certain way, and it's not actually making change. So I would say that not include us, we have to be at the forefront and at the center of everything. You know, so if we're included, we're still in that system where we're just being considered and we're not actually part of it. We're not, like Travis saying, we're not the system.
So glad this is being recorded. I'm an academic, as I've said already, where I did do my PhD was in the States, in fairness, but not really, because the university space is really in the West is a monolith in terms of like the processes of policy making and pretenses of inclusion, and I think. Yeah, look, what Travis said is really real, like on all the fronts, and Roger as well. But just like thinking of my own experiences, being at the head of student government, because they did that, right? They put me at the front. I was the main officer. It was called the solidarity officer, so they wouldn't have like diversity because we didn't want to have like the same like make everything equal, because I don't want equality. I want equity and liberation. But then it came to the point that people were like, how do we make things, they still use the word diverse, right? Because that's still the intention. How do we make this thing more diverse? How do we get equality? We're all for equality in California, hippies, tie-dye, etc. And then it became down to like me doing the work, right? Because I'm at the head of the table, right? So I'm the one that's doing it. I was doing a PhD, right? So I have and I'm just like trying to build my art, trying to like hone my craft for my communities, etc. I'm also an activist. Like I was trying to do all of these things, and it came to the point that affective labor, time, which is a resource, it became like a deficit and a detriment to my like emotional well-being, my intellectual well-being, my academic process, and then it became one of those statistics about people of color, queer, gender non-conforming people not finishing in normative time, not like living up to the standards and like doing the actual work. So while I this is not a disagreement with what Travis is saying, it's actually agreeing specifically, because if people like Travis were like not edged out of office or of a certain space, so if we were like centered and then people recognize, like regardless of like creating more jobs or like whatever capitalist thing, but just recognizing, again, it's not about you. And if you actually really believe in whatever like neoliberal ideas that you have behind diversity and inclusion, that also means you saying, yes, you like cutie pot, queer, black, trans, migrant, refugee person who is in this space, this is your job. What can I do to help you? Like, what time can I offer you? Like, you're getting paid a livable and sustainable wage. What of my resources can I put behind you? Like, I want, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like a bit of a rant, but I want like the support of UAL, which is not even just you individually, like the support of the institution, which has, yes, a lot of the money, but a lot of resources. Like they can make things easier. Like to have the full weight, because then a student would come to you, and even if it's not in the like trans asterisk or no asterisk are welcome here. I think that sometimes when I see that, like at my university, it was like a little rainbow triangle sign, and it said, what was it? It was like safe space. They would just like have stickers, and they like put the stickers and say it was a safe space. That was the least safe that I've spent in my entire life. So you know what I mean? And so it's not about a name or label or a sticker, but to make it felt that the university and all institutional resources are behind the people, so you can actually get things done. Because we're efficient when given the resources, and we're fierce and we can topple things.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's more about inclusion and not exclusion. And I felt that when I was at UAL myself, I didn't feel like there was enough resources for me to refer to or look at as examples of, you know, where my research was going. It was more about the westernized white ideal, if that makes sense, and what they kind of embodied within that kind of design world, and that wasn't what I wanted. I was going in a different direction, and it would have just been nice that there was resources that I could refer to, or sources or individuals like myself, you know, that were like shades of blanc, which is obviously taking place now. If that had started when I was actually doing my degree, I think it would have made such a big difference to, you know, the way I felt about design, and obviously where my work was going, because again, it's all about inclusion, not exclusion, and that's an important part of anything, really.
Thank you. We can take one more question. Okay, good. Yes. Sorry.
Can you just take the book?
Yeah, we can try. Yeah.
I'm currently studying MA in Fashion Artifacts, and I wrote my proposal last January, and it's all about breaking down barriers of gender and how to create discussion around gender inequalities. So when I started doing my research, I started posting things online, and like I have family and friends online. I got an amazing amount of abuse from like family and friends saying like, "Oh, you're a feminist now. Like, what does this mean? Are you like going against your own gender?" And I've experienced gender inequalities in my life. Like, I've travelled alone, and that's come as really shocking to people. Oh, you're a girl, you can't travel alone. And like, I'm into fitness and boot camps, and I do that with guys, and that you're a girl, you can't do as well. So what I'm trying to do is create a collection from my degree of artifact objects that create dialogue among people to break down barriers. So how do you feel, like what kind of form do you think something should take to be able to create this dialogue among audiences? That makes sense.
Narratives, people's stories.
Yeah?
It's a good answer. What was the other question?
Sorry. So speaking of narrative, for instance, how would you picture a gender-neutral wedding where the narrative is so restricted, the script so scripted? You know the role of everyone, the bride, the groom. How would you picture a gender-neutral wedding then?
I've lost.
Okay, just gonna go ahead with those last two questions together. Quickly, I think. Well, I wonder actually what the fun things about this, because my first thought was that there's nothing neutral about gender because it's actively murdering, oppressing, infiltrating our lives, lived experiences. It's actively taking our resources, again, emotionally, financially, and otherwise. So there's no such thing. But if people were like gender non-conforming and then decided for, reasons to have a Western or normative wedding, then they'd present as they wanted to as those people, and then it would be default a gender non-conforming wedding. But the pretense of gender neutrality, also in terms of something as, I want to say ludicrous as a wedding, but those are just my own opinions. It's all my own opinions. It's almost like a direct oxymoron as far as I'm concerned, because weddings and matrimony, as we know it, exists to reinforce the state. It exists to actually uphold that women, femme or otherwise, are property. And it's, that this is the history of matrimony, right? It's in books or on Wikipedia or something. And so to then put yourself into it, it's almost like some rhetoric I hear about people wanting like queer or black or trans president, like you're still in service of something that is bigger than you, and it's at a certain point your identities get swallowed up and subsumed in service of this incredibly violent thing that should just be abolished. As for the other question, I just want to big up what Roger was saying and say, even if it is your specific project or passion or desire to specifically, at every step that you can, especially if you recognize that you have privilege, if you know what that means, and not just saying like, I have privilege, and then go on and walk through the world and like give yourself pats on the backs or biscuits and things, but say, it legitimately is not about me, but I have this passion, but I am creative, but I have talents that I want to share with the world in service of my communities. I'm going to go around and like ask people what they think, and ask for their input, and then also pay them, and then also support them and showcase them, and then recognize too, this is not about like just shedding all your power, except secretly it is. This is just like the beginning step. Just saying like, privilege other people's voices and stories and narratives, and then have them in that space, and then at the end recognize that power does not have to exist in any kind of like binary sense either, that there can be a field of power in service of a collective and liberatory force.
I'll just keep it short because I know we're pressed for time. Just like, I'm interested in like what it would mean to like bring, so like art school and access, right? Like what privileges it is for like, I'm doing a degree at the moment that already abates me like so much. What would it mean for you to then like go to the people that use the word is it art? Yeah, so so to me, objects, I'm just gonna use objects, it feels more comfortable with me. So like take the objects, but also, not take them actually, like there's no taking involved here. You find the objects, you find who owns the objects, you bring them with you, and you say, come along, let me pay for your transport, let me get you your food, and if you've got the budget from here, let me pay you. And then your exhibition, or like however it works, is them talking about their objects from their heart. That's how you'll start a dialogue, because it will be really authentic to them. And also it then brings people that don't have access to CSM or Ravensbourne or Gryffindor. It brings them, I was thinking it right, I was like, shit. It brings them in, and then they have like this access too, and then their voice, and you put them on the plaque too, like it's your work with these people. That would be hella dope, and then I'd be so excited to see your work and see their work too, and it becomes like this collective. I'm Team Slytherin.
Right, thank you so much for the questions, and now we have a performance.
Yeah. We're gonna clear the stage.
Yeah.
Can they see me if they do that? No. We'll maybe have like the white screen. Let me leave the lights on, it's fine, I don't need no mood, I'll try and create it. So from the beginning of the show, okay, with roots from the beginning. Yeah. You're doing it. You know. Well, I mean, I can also press play it, just look less. So like, preface, this is like really weird to perform without a mic, and also without like lights and stuff like, oh no, not yet. Sorry.
Feel the love though.
Yeah, we're gonna feel the love and it's gonna be fun. What I'm gonna do is, I'm doing a show at the moment called Stories of a Queer Brown Muddy Kid. It's gonna be in the Hackney Attic, and it's also touring next week in some universities, Wadham, Oxford, ooh, my whole bag's coming out, and Strike Anthology launch, so this is gonna be a taster from that. But also, like, I wanted to bring up a poem and a piece that is specifically around fashion that's not in the show. So we'll just see how it goes. If you can't hear me at the back, also people at the front, I'm going to be shouting because I'm not used to not having a mic, so I'm sorry. If you can't hear me at the back, I do not mind you all going like, because there's going to be music and stuff and I'll see it. Okay, let's go, sweet. Sorry, in order to go, can I just have like, did we enjoy the event? Can we have a cheer? Yeah. Mom! What is it, Travis? I'm coming out! Of where? The closet! I'm gay! If you're sure. Mom! What is it, Travis? I'm going out! Where? To CSM! I'm invading white institutions of art and bringing queer black unapologeticness to it! Okay. Mom! What is it, Travis? I'm going out. Where? To GAY late. Okay, just hold on to your culture and don't forget your roots. We'll have that louder. They said to step into the, we'll have it louder. Yeah, cool. They said do not forget the binaries and the race evades, ooh, color. Oh, Travis, fuck me harder. Just like that, Travis, fuck me harder. One more thrust, no care, no ask. Just rag, doll, love. Oh, Travis, fuck me harder. Just like that, Travis, fuck me harder. 2. We're gonna have to start again, sorry, what's doing it? Can we start again? Sorry, friends. We got some technical. He said to step into his bedroom. I don't see race here. They said, come right in to play. We good? Oh, Travis, fuck me harder. Just like that, Travis, fuck me harder. One more thrust, no care, no ask. Just rag, doll, love. Oh, Travis, fuck me harder. Just like that, Travis, fuck me harder. 2 more moans. 1 moan of ecstasy, 1 moan of wonderment. He finally got his queer brown muddy boy. Push it down deeper, Travis. Left, now right. Be my fuck, oh Travis. Three more cries. One cry of pain, one cry of lust, one cry of institutionalized preferential expectations. 3 cries. Oh, Travis, fuck me harder. Just like that, Travis. Fuck me harder. 4 expectations. This little brown boy will fuck you senseless. This little brown boy will be aggressive. This little brown boy will call you bro. And this little brown boy will be your Negro fantasy. Travis? Yeah? Fuck me harder. Go on, Travis. Fuck me harder. 5 more minutes till he stops. 5 more minutes till he comes. 5 more minutes till I get my breath back. Till I remember who I am. I am his Negro. His bucket to places come to empty his microaggressions and racial angst. I am his fuck me harder test bot. No soul. No boundaries. Just oh, Travis, fuck me harder. Just oh, Travis, swallow me faster. Just oh, Travis, you are mine to use, and mine to refuse, and mine to abuse. Your mind, an anomaly, not an important measure. Your skin is a novelty, not an important treasure. So Travis, I can't pronounce your last name. Just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fuck me harder, then run. Fuck me harder, then I'm done. Travis Salablanza, taste my cum. His cum, it tastes like institutionalized racism. And his breath, it smelled like Eurocentric ideas of beauty in his hands. They rubbed against mine like 200 plus years of colonization. And our eyes, they met like racial angst, ready to explode. And I decided I'm not your dom top. Your aggressive black boy, your Maltesers to chew on your galaxy bar to break up and throw out the next day. I'm not yours to swipe left to when you realize I'm wearing a skirt. I'm not your mask boy, your team lighty, your one to throw out if I was one shade darker. I'm not yours to discard when I grow out my hair. Travis, what is it, Mum? I'm busy. I don't think you should go to GA Wiley anymore. Why? They don't love you. You've got people at home for that. I'm coming home, Mum. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I thought I'd start with that. Really weird doing that in this space, but cool. Okay, I'm sorry the music wasn't loud enough. So this one I thought I'd read because it's like specifically related to this feeling that we were talking about of safety. So yeah. How we doing?
Great.
Good, because I'm going to need you all to sing in a bit, so... Okay. I pressed my unsmooth, big, broad hands on my even broader shoulders. And I'm trying to ignore their size and focus on the blue sequins that fell upon them. No luck. The stubble inducing my face and the whip demanded in my pace gained far more attention than the sparkle in this dress. The hair growing up my thigh and the length of my feet were far more visible than the intricate detail within the scene. The deepness in my voice and the squelch of my bulge were heard far more clearer than the narrative I was asking to be told. No luck. No luck this time, yet in my head I tried to rewind and take myself and my mind a couple of hours back in time to when I was posing in front of the mirror. Serving a hot dish of realness with a fierce cup of brown gender fluid femboy fierceness and for afters. A huge dollop of not within your binary black kid killing it. Because for that moment, without the outside world, I was fully feeling it. I was full-blown Gale Force Wind of Janelle, Mickey, Cakes, Dark Matter, Beyonce feeling it. I was a carefree brown kid. Flowing through the feminine grips of my ancestors and evading all the clouds that escaped all binaries. I was the 9-year-old me that could never be. Hear my genderless plea, I was feeling damn free. I was feeling damn free. The blue sea sequins fell perfectly on my brown skin as if every bump and lump was made for each sparkle. The black matte lippy sank onto my full mouth as if the paint was designed for the crevices of my body, and the colour on my brow shone bright, as if blended into the hairs designed by Mother Nature herself. It just felt right. I felt right. The caged body was finally unleashed and flowing through the binaries into an eclipse of colour. Until I stepped outside. Your feet were too big, your hair too visible, your jaw too structured, your walk too clumsy, your voice too husky, and your body too trapped. Despite how I felt, despite what the mirror told me, the world needed those blue sequins to fit into a case, for the lipstick to be sealed in its tube, and for my brows to be nice and neat. Travis, you're wearing a dress and you look fabulous, patronising Snap Z formation, but tell me, are you a boy or a girl now? And I love you either way, just don't, please, whatever you do, make it complicated and say neither. And with that, I pressed my unsmooth, big, broad hands on my even broader shoulders, took a sigh, looked at the well-intent cis person in the eye and decided that tomorrow, when asked if I'm a boy or a girl, maybe I won't have to decide. Thank you. Okay, we're going to do one more. Thank you so much to Shades of Noir for having me. The amazing panellists, like we spoke so much truth, but different kind of truths, which was so refreshing. And for the folk, particularly the POC and black folk in the audience that shared their narrative too, it's really beautiful to see. This is weird for me because I actually got into CSM 3 years ago and I didn't go, and it was a combination of wanted to apply to a lot of art schools and didn't do it, and it's a combination of my own willpower but also upbringing, and I think a lot of it just comes down to class and like that fear of like taking the risk and going to art school instead of, you know, then going to King's or whatever that means. So I often think what it would have looked like if I followed what I wanted. And how that would have looked, so just power to all the black folk in these art schools because that must be fucking tough. And thanks to Shade of Noir for creating an outlet to like let them have that, like it's just so dope and important. So this one requires all y'all audience participation, so how are we feeling about that?
Great.
That's not, how are we feeling about that? Good. And secretly it's because I can't sing, so, right, so I'm gonna sing to you what you're gonna be doing. And then just don't watch my high note. I can't hit the high note, so imagine the high note because you're gonna hear it. And we're gonna sing it, I'm gonna get that you got it, and then I'll carry on with my piece. But we only go on with it if I know that you got it at the volume we like, okay? So let me sing to you what you're gonna be singing, okay? La, 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 la. I can't sing. What about their body? What about their protection? What about their body? What about their protection? So it's always twice round, okay? Let's hear you sing it. 1, 2, 3, 4. What about their body? What about their protection? What about their body? What about their protection? Now sing it as if your mum was here and you were trying to impress her, okay? Let's go. Jeez, like seriously, art students, come on. Okay, Gryffindor, work on it. 3, 2, 1. What am I doing? 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
What about their body? What about their protection? What about their body? What about their protection?
What about my body makes it not worth your protection? Makes me undeserving of a text to check I arrived home okay. No offer to walk this body through cis-ridden streets because my lipstick on this leg hair affords me no protection. And what about my existence? Makes me not worthy of your care because my skirt and heels is a choice to deviate and never wonder, and only our sisters can be afraid of the darker alleys because no one cares if my mascara is ridden with fearful tears.
What about their body? What about their protection? What about their bodies? What about their protection?
And I'm tired of bodies like mine having to scream for your protection. Write statuses and articles just to convince you of our danger. Break nails through clenching fist in fright. Blackened eyeshadow to preempt our bruises. Because what about my body has given warrant to this danger? What about my body has given warrant to this danger? What about my body has given warrant to this danger?
What about their bodies? What about their protection? What about their bodies? What about their protection?
What is it about my body that makes it so disposable? Makes it welcome to your laughter, but never your safekeeping. No, it is never granted your anger in persevering, because this body's breathing is birthed in synonym for violence. And what about my shade of tights? Makes my legs born to be running, because I am only ever correctly in function when I am in fear, and only ever cared for when on stage, but never on the streets. Because what is this body if it is not your performance? This is my body and it is not your performance. This is my body and it is not your performance.
What about their bodies? What about their protection? What about their bodies? What about their protection?
And I'm exhausted of having to make words just to have your ears. Write songs for you to sing just to hear what protection feels like. Break my silence only to ignite temporary rage, because what about my body has to beg for this protection? What about my body has to set chorus lines for this protection? What about my body has to prompt you to sing for this protection?
What about their bodies? What about their protection? What about their bodies? What about their protection?
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much, everybody. I mean, all the panellists were amazing. I think we need to give them a round of applause. Now, I hope you're taking away something as powerful as what the panellists presented, but also to think about your own position. I learned quite a lot today. For me, there was so many stories and narratives and power and empowerment that was presented here. It's made me feel quite emotional, actually. So again, panellists, thank you so much for sharing today.